The dust from the stagecoach still hung in the air like a shroud when Sarah Mitchell stumbled into the trading post, her dress torn at the hem, bruises flowering purple across her wrists. 3 days running from her father's ranch, 3 days since she'd refused to marry the cattle baron twice her age, 3 days since her father's fist had taught her the price of defiance. Her fingers trembled as she fumbled with the gold locket around her neck, her mother's last gift before fever took her, and held it out to the weathered man behind the counter. "Please," she whispered, her voice cracking like dried leather. "I need food, water, anything." Before I continue, I'd love to ask you to take a moment to subscribe to the channel and give this video a like. It truly means so much to us and motivates us to bring you more quality content like this. Also, I'm curious, where are you listening to this story from today? The shopkeeper reached for the locket, but a calloused hand intercepted it, closing Sarah's fingers gently back around the precious metal. She looked up into eyes the color of a summer storm, grey with flecks of blue that seemed to see straight through her fear. "Gold isn't what matters here," the stranger said, his voice low and steady as bedrock. He was tall, shoulders broad enough to block out the sun streaming through the doorway, with dark hair that brushed his collar and a jaw carved from the same stone as the mountains beyond town. A scar ran from his temple to his cheekbone, white against sun-bronzed skin. "You keep that. Bill, put together supplies for the lady. I'll settle the account." "Cole, you can't keep—" the shopkeeper started. "I said I'll settle it." There was no anger in Cole's tone, just the kind of certainty that made grown men step aside. Sarah wanted to protest, to claim she didn't need charity, but her hollow stomach betrayed her pride. "I'll work to repay you," she managed. "I can cook, clean, mend." "Can you ride?" Cole asked, studying her with an intensity that made her skin warm despite her exhaustion. Some. My father didn't approve of women." "Your father sounds like a fool." He picked up the bundle of supplies Bill had assembled and gestured toward the door. "My ranch is 5 miles north. I need help with the house and the horses. You need a place where whoever put those bruises on you can't find you. Seems like we can help each other." The ride to the Broken Creek Ranch taught Sarah 2 things. She was a terrible rider, and Cole Remington had the patience of a saint. He never laughed when she nearly slid off the gentle mare 3 times, just adjusted her grip on the reins and murmured instructions in that steady voice that made her feel like maybe, just maybe, she could survive this. The ranch itself was beautiful in its starkness, a sturdy log house nestled against red rock cliffs, a barn that smelled of fresh hay, corrals where horses moved like liquid gold in the fading light. It was also clearly a bachelor's domain, with dust thick on every surface and dishes piled in the basin. "I know it's rough," Cole said, scratching the back of his neck in what Sarah would come to recognize as his gesture of discomfort. "My wife. She passed 2 winters ago. Haven't had the heart to keep things the way she did." The rawness in his voice made Sarah's chest tighten. "I'm sorry for your loss. And I'm sorry for whatever sent you running." He met her eyes, and something unspoken passed between them, 2 wounded souls recognizing each other in the wilderness. "The barn has a loft if you'd prefer privacy. House has a spare room. Your choice. Either way, you're safe here. That's a promise." Sarah chose the house, though she wedged a chair under the door handle that first night, old habits dying hard. But Cole never tried the door, never gave her reason to doubt his word. He was up before dawn working the horses, and she woke to the smell of terrible coffee and burned bacon. "Let me," she said, taking the pan from his hands before he could set the whole kitchen ablaze. Their fingers brushed, and electricity sparked up her arm. Cole jerked back like he'd been burned, and Sarah understood. They were both fighting the same battle, the one between wanting and being too damaged to trust wanting anything. The days fell into a rhythm. Sarah transformed the house, scrubbing away years of grief dust, mending curtains, cooking meals that made Cole close his eyes in something close to bliss. He taught her to ride properly, his hand steady on her waist as he lifted her into the saddle, his voice patient as he explained weight and balance and trust. "The horse feels your fear," he said one afternoon, standing close enough that she could smell leather and sage on his skin. "You have to let go of it." "And if I can't?" Sarah asked, hating the tremor in her voice. Cole's hand came up, hovering near her cheek, but not quite touching. "Then you fake it until it's real. Courage isn't the absence of fear, Sarah. It's doing what needs doing despite it." She thought about that at night, lying in the narrow bed, listening to Cole's footsteps in the room across the hall. Thought about courage and fear, and the way his grey eyes darkened when he looked at her for too long. Thought about the warmth spreading through her chest that had nothing to do with the Montana sun, and everything to do with the quiet man who asked nothing of her but her company. 2 weeks in, Sarah's world tilted on its axis. She was gathering eggs in the barn when she heard horses, too many horses, moving too fast. Cole was by the south pasture, too far to hear. Sarah's blood turned to ice when she recognized the voice calling out, "Sarah Mitchell, I know you're here. Your father's offering $500 for your return." Marcus Webb, the cattle baron her father had tried to sell her to like prized livestock. Through a gap in the barn boards, she saw 6 men, all armed, all hard-eyed. Sarah's hand found the pistol Cole had insisted she carry. He'd taught her to shoot, his body pressed against her back as he guided her aim, his breath warm on her neck. "You're not property," he'd said. "You're a person, and a person has the right to defend themselves." She couldn't defend herself against 6 men, but she could run, get to Cole, warn him. She made it halfway to the house before a rope caught her ankle, sending her sprawling. The impact knocked the gun from her grip, hands grabbed her arms, and she screamed, not in fear but in rage, scratching and kicking like a wildcat. "Goddamn hellcat!" One of the men swore, and then pain exploded across her face. Through the ringing in her ears, Sarah heard thunder, no, hoofbeats. Then Cole's voice, cold as a December wind, "Let her go." The hands released her instantly. Sarah scrambled backward, tasting copper, watching as Cole dismounted in one fluid motion. He held no gun, carried no rifle, but something in his stance made grown men reconsider their life choices. "This is none of your concern, Remington," Marcus Webb said, but his voice wavered. "The girl's father wants her home. The girl is 20 years old and decides for herself where home is." Cole's eyes never left Marcus. "And her home is here, with me." "You claiming her as yours, and claiming she's a free woman who made a choice. You don't like that. Take it up with me." Marcus's hand drifted toward his gun. Sarah's heart stopped. Cole was fast. She'd seen him draw, but 6 against 1. "Don't," she gasped, pushing herself to her feet despite the spinning in her head. She stumbled to Cole's side, her hand finding his. His fingers closed around hers, solid and warm. "Please, just go. Tell my father I'm dead. Tell him anything. Just leave." $500 says different, Marcus sneered. 10,000 says you leave now and never come back. Everyone froze. $10,000 was a fortune, enough to buy a small ranch, enough to make men forget their pride. "Cole, no," Sarah breathed. "That's your life savings. You're worth more." He said it simply, like he was stating the price of feed, but his hand tightened on hers. "What's it going to be, Webb?" The calculation played across Marcus's face. Finally, he spat in the dust. "You're a fool, Remington. That much money for used goods." Cole moved so fast Sarah barely saw it. One moment he was beside her. The next his fist connected with Marcus's jaw with a crack that echoed off the mountains. Marcus hit the ground hard, and Cole stood over him, breathing heavy, knuckles split. "Call her that again," Cole said quietly, And I'll kill you. That's not a threat. That's a promise. They left. 6 men riding hard for the horizon, and Sarah couldn't stop shaking. Cole turned to her, and the coldness in his eyes melted into something raw and terrified. "Are you hurt?" His hands hovered over her, checking for injuries, and she wanted to laugh and cry because he'd just given up everything for her, and he was asking if she was hurt. "I'm fine. Cole, you didn't have to." "Yes, I did." He cupped her face, his thumb gentle on her bruised cheek. "Sarah, I haven't been living the past 2 years. I've been existing, going through motions, but you made me remember what it feels like to want to wake up in the morning, what it feels like to hope." "I don't want your pity," she whispered. "Good, because that's not what this is." He leaned his forehead against hers, and she could feel him trembling. "This is me being terrified because I'm falling for you, and I don't know if I have the right to ask you to stay." Sarah's breath caught. "I'm afraid," she whispered. "Afraid of wanting, afraid of trusting, afraid of this wild hope blooming in her chest." But Cole's hands were steady on her face, and his eyes held hers like she was the only solid thing in a spinning world. "I know," he said. "So am I. But we'll be afraid together." That night the storm came. Sarah woke to thunder shaking the house and rain hammering the roof like bullets. She found Cole on the porch, staring at the deluge, his shirt already soaked through. "Can't sleep?" she asked, wrapping a shawl around her shoulders. "Thinking about what I said earlier." He didn't look at her. "You should know. The money I offered Webb, I don't actually have it. I was bluffing. If he'd called it, then we'd have fought," Sarah finished. She moved beside him, close enough that their shoulders touched. "Together. Together," he echoed, and something shifted between them like a door opening. Lightning split the sky, illuminating his face, and Sarah saw the truth written there, the loneliness, the longing, the barely contained need. She knew because she felt it too, this ache that had nothing to do with bruises and everything to do with the way he looked at her like she mattered. "Cole," she whispered. And then his mouth was on hers, gentle despite the storm, asking permission with every breath. She answered by fisting her hands in his wet shirt, pulling him closer, pouring 2 years of grief and 3 weeks of growing love into the kiss. They broke apart, gasping. "Go slow," Sarah breathed against his lips because her heart was racing and her hands were shaking, and this felt too big, too real. "It hurts. I'll die before I hurt you," Cole swore, and she believed him. Believed it in the reverent way he touched her face, in the restraint that made his muscles shake, in the way he pulled back when she tensed. "I see a woman worth saving," he murmured, echoing words he'd said weeks ago. A woman worth everything. Sarah felt tears slip down her cheeks, mingling with rain. "I see a man worth loving," she whispered back. "A man worth staying for." They stood in the storm, holding each other, until the thunder passed. The peace lasted 3 days. Sarah was in the barn grooming Cole's stallion when she heard the shot. She ran, her heart in her throat, and found Cole on the ground by the north pasture, blood spreading across his shoulder. 3 men on horseback, not Marcus's crew, but someone else, claimed jumpers she'd learn later, men who'd decided the Broken Creek Ranch was ripe for taking. "Stay back," Cole shouted at her, but Sarah was already moving, grabbing his rifle from where it had fallen, her hands steady despite the terror screaming through her veins. She'd never shot at a person before. Cole had taught her to hunt rabbit and quail, to respect the weight of taking a life. But these men wanted to take Cole from her, and something fierce and primal rose in her chest. The first shot went wide, kicking up dust near the lead rider's horse. The animal reared, and the man swore. The second shot found its mark, not the man, but the ground inches from his boot, close enough to make him reconsider his choices. "The next one won't miss," Sarah called out, her voice shaking but her aim true. Leave now, or I'll paint this field with your blood." They left. Maybe they saw the madness in her eyes, or maybe they just didn't think the ranch was worth dying for. Sarah didn't care. She dropped the rifle and fell to her knees beside Cole, her hands pressing against the wound. "You're okay," she sobbed, even though blood was seeping through her fingers. "You're going to be okay. I won't let you leave me. Do you hear me, Cole Remington? I won't let you—" "Hey!" he gasped, his good hand coming up to cover hers. "I'm okay. Sarah, breathe. I'm okay." But she couldn't breathe, couldn't think past the terror of almost losing him. "I'm afraid," she sobbed, holding his hand so tight her knuckles went white. The words tumbled out in a rush. "I'm afraid of losing you, afraid of loving you, afraid of what happens if—" "But don't be afraid," Cole interrupted, his grey eyes fierce despite the pain. "I'm your shield, remember, just like you're mine. Together, Sarah, we face it together." The words steadied her. She took a shaking breath and nodded. Together. Getting him back to the house was agony, for him because of the wound, for her because every grunt of pain he made felt like a knife to her own chest. She cleaned the injury with shaking hands, grateful it had gone clean through, and stitched him up while he bit down on leather and tried not to scream. "You're doing good," Cole gritted out, his free hand finding hers. "You're so strong, Sarah, so damn strong." "I learned from you," she whispered, tying off the last stitch. Then she collapsed beside the bed, her forehead pressing against his hip, her whole body shaking with delayed shock. "I thought I'd lost you. I thought—" "You saved my life." His fingers tangled in her hair, gentle despite the tremor in his hand. "My fierce, beautiful shield." That night Sarah didn't leave his side. She sat in the chair beside his bed, her hand in his, and watched him sleep. Watched the rise and fall of his chest, the flutter of his eyelashes, the peace on his face despite the pain he had to be in. When he woke near dawn, she was still there. "Marry me," Cole said, his voice rough with sleep and pain medication. Sarah blinked. "What?" "Marry me." He struggled to sit up, wincing, and she rushed to help him. "I know it's fast. I know we're both damaged and scared and probably making terrible decisions. But Sarah, I have never been more certain of anything in my life. You are my home. You are my hope. You are the reason I remember how to live instead of just survive. Marry me, please." She should have said no. Should have pointed out they'd known each other barely a month, that he was injured and probably delirious, that love didn't work this way in real life. But this wasn't real life. This was the wild, untamed West, where tomorrow was never promised, and the only moment that mattered was now. "Yes," Sarah breathed, and then she was kissing him, careful of his shoulder, pouring every ounce of love and fear and hope into the contact. "Yes, you impossible, wonderful man. Yes." They married a week later in the small church in town, with Bill from the trading post and his wife as witnesses. Sarah wore a simple blue dress she'd sewn herself, wildflowers in her hair that Cole had picked one-handed. He wore his best shirt, his arm still in a sling, his eyes never leaving her face. "I see you," the preacher said, the old words taking on new meaning. "Do you take this woman?" "I do," Cole said, his voice steady as stone. "I see a woman worth saving, worth everything." "And do you take this man?" Sarah looked at Cole, at his scarred face and healing shoulder, at the grey eyes that had seen through her fear to the strength beneath, at the hands that had held her so carefully when she'd been ready to shatter. "I do," she whispered. "I see a man worth loving, worth staying for. Then by the power vested in me, I pronounce you husband and wife. You may kiss your bride." Cole did, slow and sweet and full of promise, and Sarah felt something settle in her chest. The last piece of a puzzle she hadn't known was incomplete. This was home. This was safety. This was love. The next months taught them what it meant to build a life together. Cole taught Sarah to ride like she was born in the saddle, to shoot with deadly accuracy, to read the weather in the shape of clouds. She taught him to laugh again, to let someone in past the walls he'd built around his grief, to believe that love could come twice in a lifetime. They fought sometimes, about money, about safety, about Cole's tendency to work himself to exhaustion, and Sarah's habit of taking on too much, but they always came back to the same place, together. That word became their anchor, their promise, their prayer. 1 year after she'd stumbled into the trading post with her mother's locket and nothing else, Sarah stood on the porch of the Broken Creek Ranch, watching the sunset paint the mountains gold. Cole came up behind her, his arms wrapping around her waist, his chin resting on her shoulder. "What are you thinking about?" he murmured. "About fear," Sarah said, leaning back into his warmth. "About how I was afraid of everything a year ago. And I'm still afraid sometimes, afraid something will take this away, afraid I don't deserve it. And then I remember what you told me. That courage isn't the absence of fear. It's doing what needs doing despite it." She turned in his arms, her hands coming up to frame his face. "You made me brave, Cole Remington." "No," he said, smiling that slow smile that still made her heart skip. "You were always brave. I just helped you remember." They kissed as the sun set, two broken people who'd found wholeness in each other. Two shields forged in fire and fear and fierce, unshakable love. The West was wild and dangerous and unforgiving, but they faced it the only way they knew how. Together. Epilogue. 5 years later. The sound of laughter echoed across the ranch as two children, a boy of 4 and a girl of 3, chased chickens through the yard with more enthusiasm than skill. Sarah watched from the porch, one hand resting on her rounded belly, the 4th Remington child already making their presence known. Cole rode up from the south pasture, dismounting in that fluid way that still made Sarah's pulse quicken even after years of marriage. He swept the children up, one in each arm, and they shrieked with delight. "Mama, Mama, Papa caught a wild horse." The boy Thomas shouted, "It was already tame, you little storyteller." Cole laughed, setting them down and heading to Sarah. His hand found hers automatically, fingers intertwining. "How are you feeling?" "Like I'm carrying a baby horse instead of a baby human." Sarah groaned, but she was smiling. But happy, so happy. Cole kissed her forehead, his other hand resting gently on her stomach. "I love you," he said, like he did every day, like the words were air and he couldn't breathe without them. "I love you too," Sarah replied like she always did, meaning it more with every passing year. Their daughter, Emma, tugged on Cole's sleeve. "Papa, tell us the story again. About when Mama saved you from the bad men." "I think Mama should tell that one," Cole said, winking at Sarah. So Sarah did. As the sun set over the mountains and the children curled up on the porch, safe and loved. She told them about fear and courage, about being someone's shield and letting them be yours, about finding home in the most unexpected places. She told them about love. And when the story was done and the children were asleep, Cole pulled Sarah close and whispered in her ear, "Together." "Always," Sarah whispered back, "always together." The winter of their 6th year together came hard and fast, blanketing the Broken Creek Ranch in snow so deep the horses couldn't reach the hay bales in the north field. Sarah stood at the kitchen window, watching Cole and their eldest son Thomas trudge through waist-high drifts, their breath forming clouds in the bitter air. Emma tugged at her mother's skirt. "Mama, when will Papa come back?" "Soon, sweetheart," Sarah murmured, though worry gnawed at her stomach. The storm had been building for days, and the temperature kept dropping. She rested a hand on her belly. 7 months along now, and this baby seemed determined to make their presence known at the most inconvenient times. When Cole finally stomped through the door 2 hours later, his face was grim. Thomas followed, his lips tinged blue despite the layers of clothing. "We lost 3 head," Cole said quietly, peeling off his frozen gloves. "Found them huddled in the ravine. Froze to death before we could get to them." Sarah's heart sank. 3 cattle meant less income come spring, less meat for the winter, less security for their growing family. But she saw the defeat in Cole's eyes and knew he was beating himself up far worse than any words she could say. "You did everything you could," she said firmly, crossing to him and cupping his frozen face in her warm hands. "Those animals had you, the best rancher in Montana. If they couldn't make it, it wasn't for lack of trying." Cole leaned into her touch, his eyes closing. "We can't afford to lose any more, Sarah. Not with the baby coming, not with—" A sharp crack split the air, followed by a crash that shook the house. They all jumped, and little Emma started to cry. Cole was moving before Sarah could react, grabbing his rifle and heading for the door. "Stay inside," he ordered. But Sarah was already wrapping a shawl around her shoulders. "Together, remember?" she said, giving him a look that brooked no argument. They found the problem quickly. The barn roof had collapsed under the weight of snow and ice. Through the gaping hole, Sarah could see their remaining horses panicking, trapped in their stalls. Smoke rose from the corner where a lantern had fallen, and flames were already licking at the dry hay. "Get water!" Cole shouted, already running toward the barn. "Thomas, pump the well. Sarah, help me get the horses out before the whole thing goes up." The next 20 minutes were chaos. Sarah waded through smoke and flames, her pregnant belly making her clumsy, but she forced herself to move. She reached the first stall and fumbled with the latch, her hands shaking from cold and fear. The mare inside was wild-eyed with terror, rearing and striking out. "Easy, girl," Sarah crooned, the way Cole had taught her years ago. "Easy. I've got you." The mare settled just enough for Sarah to get the gate open. The horse bolted past her, nearly knocking her down, but Sarah was already moving to the next stall. Smoke burned her lungs, and she could feel the heat of the flames growing closer. She heard Cole's voice through the roar of fire. "Sarah, get out! The roof's going to collapse." "Not without the horses," she shouted back, opening another stall. This one held Cole's prized stallion, the black beauty he'd trained from a colt. The horse was too terrified to move, pressed against the back wall. Sarah didn't think. She waded into the stall, grabbed the horse's halter, and pulled with all her strength. "Come on, you stubborn beast. You want to die here? Move!" Something in her voice must have gotten through, because the stallion suddenly lunged forward, nearly trampling her in his panic to escape. Sarah stumbled backward, her foot catching on loose hay, and she went down hard. Pain exploded through her abdomen, sharp and wrong and terrifying. She tried to push herself up, but her arms wouldn't cooperate. Through the smoke, she saw Cole's face appear, pale with fear. "Sarah!" He scooped her up like she weighed nothing, despite her protests, and carried her out of the burning barn. The cold air hit her like a slap, and she gasped, coughing violently. "The baby," she managed to choke out. "Cole, something's wrong." He was already moving, carrying her toward the house, shouting for Thomas to ride for the doctor in town. But Sarah knew. She could feel it in the wetness spreading down her legs, in the cramping pain that made her double over. "Too early," she gasped. "It's too early." "You're going to be fine," Cole said, but his voice shook. "Both of you. You're going to be fine." He laid her on their bed, his hands shaking as he tried to make her comfortable. Emma stood in the doorway, crying, and Sarah wanted to comfort her daughter, but couldn't find the words through the pain. The next hours blurred together. The doctor didn't make it. The roads were impassable with snow. Cole delivered his own child with hands that had pulled calves and foals, but never something so precious, so terrifying. Sarah screamed until her throat was raw, gripping his hand so hard she felt bones grind. "I see the head," Cole said, his voice barely steady. Sarah, you need to push. One more time, love. You can do this. I can't, she sobbed. Cole, I can't. Yes, you can. He looked up at her, and his grey eyes were fierce with belief. You're the strongest person I know. You're my shield, remember? You don't give up. Ever. Sarah found some reserve of strength she didn't know she possessed and pushed. The baby slid into Cole's waiting hands, tiny and blue and terrifyingly silent. No, Sarah whispered. No, please. Cole moved with purpose, turning the baby over, clearing its mouth, rubbing its back vigorously. For 3 heartbeats that lasted an eternity, nothing happened. Then the baby gasped and cried and lived. A girl, Cole said, his voice breaking as he wrapped their daughter in blankets and placed her on Sarah's chest. We have another daughter. Sarah looked down at the tiny, perfect face and felt tears stream down her cheeks. She's so small, she whispered. But she's a fighter, Cole said, pressing a kiss to Sarah's sweaty forehead. Just like her mother. They named her Hope because that's what she represented. Hope that they could survive anything, hope that their family would endure, hope that love was stronger than fear. The barn burned to the ground that night. They lost most of their winter feed and 3 more cattle who couldn't be moved in time. The financial hit was devastating, the worst they'd faced since Sarah first arrived at the ranch. But as Sarah lay in bed 3 days later, nursing Hope, while Thomas and Emma curled up beside her, and Cole sat in the chair watching them all with wonder in his eyes, she realized something. They had everything that mattered. We'll rebuild, Cole said quietly, as if reading her thoughts. Spring will come. We'll survive. Together, Sarah agreed, smiling at him. We always do. Spring came, but it brought new challenges. With the barn destroyed and their savings depleted, Cole took work breaking horses for the cavalry fort 2 days' ride away. It meant being gone for weeks at a time, leaving Sarah alone with 3 children and a baby. I don't like this, Cole said the morning of his first departure. Leaving you here by yourself. I'm not by myself, Sarah interrupted, bouncing Hope on her hip. I have 3 little shadows and a shotgun. We'll be fine. But she wasn't sure she believed it. The ranch felt too big, too empty, without Cole's steady presence. At night, she startled at every creak, every sound of wind against the windows. She slept with his rifle beside the bed and taught Thomas, barely 5 years old, how to load it just in case. The first week passed without incident. The second week brought a surprise visitor. Sarah was hanging laundry when she heard the horse approaching. Her hand automatically went to the pistol at her hip, another one of Cole's lessons, but she relaxed when she recognized the rider. Bill? She shaded her eyes against the sun as the trading post owner dismounted. Is everything all right? That's what I came to ask you, Mrs. Remington. Bill's weathered face was creased with concern. Heard about your barn. Heard Cole's been gone working the fort. Thought I'd check in. Sarah's pride wanted to insist everything was fine, but practicality won out. We could use some supplies, she admitted. I can pay come fall when we sell the cattle, but right now... Credit's good, Bill interrupted. Your husband's helped me out more times than I can count. Figure it's time I returned the favor. But they were loading flour and sugar into Sarah's wagon when 3 riders appeared on the horizon. Sarah's stomach clenched when she recognized the lead horse, a blood bay with white stockings that belonged to Marcus Webb. Go inside, Bill said quietly. Take the children. I'll handle this. But Sarah had never been good at hiding. She sent Thomas to take Emma and Hope into the house, then stood beside Bill, her hand resting on her pistol. Marcus looked older than she remembered, harder around the eyes. He reined in his horse and smiled, but there was no warmth in it. Well, well, little Sarah Mitchell, heard Remington married you after all. It's Mrs. Remington now, Sarah said coldly, and you're trespassing. Leave. Came to make you an offer. Marcus leaned forward in his saddle. Heard you lost your barn. Heard you're struggling. I'll buy this property for a fair price. More than fair, considering the state of things. You and Remington can find someplace easier, without so many bad memories. This is our home, Sarah said. We're not selling. Be reasonable, Sarah. You got 3 kids and another one barely 2 months old. Your husband's gone working elsewhere because he can't make this ranch pay. How long before someone gets hurt? Before something worse happens? The words hit too close to home, echoed Sarah's own fears too perfectly. But she thought about Cole's steady presence, about the life they'd built here, about the graves of his first wife and their stillborn son under the oak tree on the hill. I said no. Her voice was steady, even though her hand shook. This is Remington land. It will stay Remington land. Now get off our property before I put a bullet through that expensive hat of yours. Marcus's smile turned ugly. You're making a mistake. Won't be my fault when this whole place comes crashing down around your ears. They left, but Sarah couldn't shake the feeling of eyes watching her for days afterward. She wrote to Cole that night, explaining what happened, but knew the letter wouldn't reach him for at least a week. She was alone. 2 nights later, Sarah woke to the smell of smoke. Her heart lurched. She grabbed the rifle and ran barefoot through the house, checking on the children. All asleep, safe. The smoke was coming from outside. Through the window, she saw flames licking at the chicken coop. Someone had set it deliberately. She could see the evidence. The empty kerosene can lying in the dirt, the too even spread of flames. Sarah's mind raced. The well was too far, and she couldn't leave the children alone to fight the fire. If it spread to the house, she made a decision. She woke Thomas and Emma, gave them clear instructions to stay with Hope in the root cellar, then grabbed every bucket and pot she could carry. The next hour was hell. Sarah ran back and forth from the well, her nightgown soaked and filthy, her hands blistering from hot metal. The fire spread to the woodpile, and she thought she'd lost the battle. But she kept going, kept fighting, kept refusing to let their home burn. Dawn was breaking when she finally collapsed on the porch, covered in soot and ash, muscles screaming. The chicken coop was gone. Half the woodpile was charcoal, but the house stood, and her children were safe. She was still sitting there when Cole rode up 3 hours later, his horse lathered from being pushed too hard. He took one look at her, at the destruction, at her blistered hands and smoke-stained face, and his expression went cold in a way that terrified her. Who did this? His voice was quiet, but Sarah heard the rage beneath it. I don't know for certain, she said tiredly, but Marcus Webb came by 2 days ago, made an offer on the ranch. I refused. Cole's jaw clenched. Where are the children? Safe. Sleeping now. Sarah stood on shaking legs. Cole, I'm sorry. I tried to stop it, but... Sorry? He pulled her into his arms, holding her so tight she could barely breathe. Sarah, you saved our home. You protected our children. There's nothing to be sorry for. I was afraid, she whispered into his chest. I was so afraid, and you weren't here, and I didn't know what to do. But you did it anyway. He pulled back enough to look at her face, his hands framing her soot-stained cheeks. That's what courage is. I'm so damn proud of you. Sarah felt something break open in her chest, the fear she'd been holding for weeks, the loneliness, the crushing weight of responsibility. She sobbed into his shirt while he held her, murmuring reassurances, being the steady rock she'd needed. When she finally pulled herself together, Cole's expression had shifted from tender to deadly. I'm going to town, he said. I'm going to have a conversation with Marcus Webb. Cole, no. Sarah grabbed his arm. If you go after him, if you hurt him, I'm not going to hurt him. Cole's smile was sharp as a knife. I'm going to make him understand that if anything happens to my family, if one more thing on this property gets damaged, I will hunt him down and make him regret the day he learned your name. And then I'm going to file a report with the sheriff about arson. Let the law handle it." Sarah wanted to argue, but she was too tired and too relieved he was home. She nodded and let him go, then went to check on the children. Cole returned that evening, his knuckles split, but his expression satisfied. "We won't have any more trouble from Webb," was all he said, and Sarah didn't ask for details. That night, lying in bed with Cole's arm around her waist and Hope sleeping in the cradle beside them, Sarah finally felt safe again. "No more leaving," she murmured into the darkness. "We find another way. Together." "Together," Cole agreed, kissing her temple. "Always together." The year Sarah turned 27, a railroad company came to Montana. The surveyors arrived in spring, mapping routes through the territory, and word spread that they'd need to buy right-of-way from landowners. Sarah was in town buying supplies when she overheard two men discussing it. "Heard they're offering $10 an acre for easements," one said. "Could be a windfall for folks smart enough to negotiate." Sarah's mind immediately went to the Broken Creek Ranch. They had 300 acres, much of it along the river valley that would be perfect for a railroad route. $10 an acre could mean $3,000, enough to rebuild the barn properly, buy breeding stock, maybe even hire help, so Cole didn't have to work himself to exhaustion. She brought the news home like a gift, excited for the first time in months about their financial future. But Cole's reaction surprised her. "No," he said flatly, not looking up from the tack he was mending. Sarah blinked. "No." "Cole, did you hear what I said? $3,000. That could change everything for us. I heard you." He set down the leather strap and finally met her eyes. "And I said no. I'm not selling an easement to the railroad." "Why not?" Sarah felt frustration rising. They'd been struggling for 2 years, ever since the barn fire and Hope's early birth. Every month was a fight to make ends meet. Every setback felt like it might be the one that broke them, and here was a solution, and he was refusing it. Because once the railroad comes through, everything changes. Cole stood and paced the porch, agitated in a way she rarely saw him. "More people. More towns, more noise. This place, it's ours, Sarah. It's quiet and wild and free. The railroad will bring progress, sure. But it'll also bring everything we left behind." "I didn't leave anything behind," Sarah said quietly. "I ran away from abuse and found you. Progress and civilization aren't my enemies, Cole. My father was." He flinched like she'd struck him. "That's not what I meant." "Then what did you mean?" She crossed her arms, suddenly cold despite the warm afternoon. "Because from where I'm standing, it looks like you're willing to let our family struggle out of stubbornness. The children need new clothes. Hope needs medicine for her cough. We need help on this ranch, Cole. We can't keep doing everything ourselves. We've managed so far." "Barely!" The word burst out of her louder than she intended. "We're barely managing, and you know it. Every winter I'm terrified we'll lose you to exposure or an accident because you're working too hard. Every spring I pray the cattle survive. Every fall I count every penny and wonder if it'll be enough. When does it end, Cole? When do we get to stop just surviving and start actually living?" The silence that followed was heavy. Cole looked at her with something like betrayal in his eyes, and Sarah felt her heart crack. "You think I don't know that?" he said finally, his voice rough. "You think I don't lie awake at night terrified I'm failing you, failing the children? But Sarah, this land, it's all I have to give you. It's my legacy, our children's inheritance. Once the railroad comes through, it won't be ours anymore. It'll be theirs." "It'll still be our land," Sarah argued, "just with a railroad easement. Cole, please, think about what this could mean for us." But he shook his head and walked away, ending the conversation. They didn't speak about it again for 3 days. The silence between them was awful, a chasm that hadn't existed since the early days of their marriage. Sarah threw herself into work, caring for the children and the house, while Cole disappeared into ranch tasks from dawn until well past dark. It was Thomas who finally broke the stalemate. "Mama, why are you and Papa fighting?" the 6-year-old asked one evening as Sarah tucked him into bed. "We're not fighting, sweetheart," Sarah said, smoothing his hair. "We just disagree about something." "Papa looks sad," Thomas said. "You look sad too. I don't like it." Neither did Sarah. That night, after the children were asleep, she found Cole sitting on the porch in the darkness, staring out at the mountains. "I'm sorry," she said, sitting beside him. "I shouldn't have pushed so hard." "No, you were right." Cole's voice was tired. "I was being stubborn, letting my fear control me instead of thinking clearly about what's best for our family." Sarah took his hand. "Tell me about the fear. Really tell me." He was quiet for so long she thought he wouldn't answer. Then, "When Mary died, my first wife, it was right after the territory started changing. More people coming, more violence, more chaos. I couldn't protect her from the fever that took her, couldn't save our son. And I started thinking that if I'd just kept this place isolated, kept the world at bay, maybe they'd still be alive." "Oh, Cole." Sarah's throat tightened. "I know it's not rational," he continued. "I know the railroad didn't give Mary scarlet fever, but in my head, change equals loss. And I can't lose you, Sarah. I can't lose our children, so I dig in and fight change tooth and nail, even when it's foolish." Sarah moved closer, resting her head on his shoulder. "You won't lose us, not to progress, not to the railroad, not to anything. We're stronger than that. We've proven it 100 times over." "I know," he said, "but knowing and believing are different things." They sat in comfortable silence for a while, just being together. Finally, Sarah spoke again. "What if we compromise? We talk to the railroad, hear their offer, and decide together whether it's right for us. No pressure, no predetermined answer, just consider the possibilities." Cole nodded slowly. "Together. Always together." The railroad representative came to the ranch a week later, a thin man in an expensive suit who looked completely out of place among the horses and cattle. Sarah served coffee while he spread maps across their kitchen table. "This is prime territory," he said, pointing to a line that would run along their southern boundary. "The route follows the river, which makes construction easier. We're prepared to offer $12 per acre for a 50-foot easement, plus annual lease payments of $50. Sarah tried not to gasp. $12 per acre was more than she'd hoped for. She glanced at Cole, but his face was unreadable. "What are the terms?" Cole asked. "How would this affect our operation?" The representative explained. "The railroad would maintain fencing along the easement, pay for any livestock killed by trains, and give the family priority shipping rates. Construction would take 6 months, during which time there would be noise and disruption, but afterward they'd have direct access to markets they could never reach before." "Think about it," the man said, standing to leave. "But don't think too long. We have other routes under consideration. I need an answer within 2 weeks." After he left, Sarah and Cole sat at the table, staring at the maps. "What do you think?" Sarah asked carefully. Cole traced the proposed route with his finger. "I think it would change everything." "Is that bad?" He looked up at her, his grey eyes thoughtful. "Maybe not. Maybe. Maybe change is just part of life, part of growing. We can't keep the world out forever." "We don't have to decide right now," Sarah said, but hope was blooming in her chest. They spent the next week discussing it, weighing pros and cons, imagining different futures. They talked to Bill at the trading post, to neighbors, to anyone who might have insight. And slowly, Sarah watched Cole come around to the idea, not because she pushed, but because he genuinely saw the opportunity. 2 weeks later, they signed the easement agreement. The railroad came through that fall, bringing exactly the chaos Cole had feared, but also the prosperity Sarah had hoped for. They rebuilt the barn, this time twice as large, with a proper loft and reinforced roof. They bought 10 head of breeding cattle and a bull. They hired a ranch hand, a young man named Jack, who worked hard and treated the children kindly. And one evening, as they stood watching a train rumble past their property line, its whistle echoing off the mountains, Cole pulled Sarah close. "Thank you," he said. "For what?" "For not giving up on me, for pushing me to take the risk, for being brave enough for both of us when I couldn't be." Sarah smiled and kissed him. "That's what shields do. We protect each other. Together." The summer of their 10th anniversary, Sarah realized their quiet life was about to get very loud. She'd been feeling off for weeks, tired, nauseous, emotional in ways that had nothing to do with the children or the ranch. When her monthly courses didn't come, she knew. When they didn't come a second month, she was certain. She was pregnant again. Sarah stood in the kitchen, one hand on her stomach, trying to process how she felt about it. Hope was 4 now, finally sleeping through the night. Thomas was 9 and Emma was 8, both helping with ranch chores. They'd finally reached a place where life felt manageable, where Sarah had time to breathe, to be something other than just a mother. And now this. She didn't tell Cole right away. She needed time to adjust to the idea, to wrap her mind around starting over with an infant. Part of her was terrified. Hope's birth had been traumatic, and the thought of going through that again made her stomach clench. But part of her was also quietly, cautiously joyful. She loved being a mother, loved the chaos and laughter and love that filled their home. She was folding laundry when she finally told him, 3 months along, and no longer able to hide the subtle changes in her body. "I'm pregnant," she said, not looking at him. Cole froze with a shirt halfway folded. "You're... what?" "Pregnant. About 3 months, I think." She forced herself to meet his eyes, to see his reaction. He looked stunned, then worried. Then, slowly, a smile spread across his face, the kind of smile that made her fall in love with him all over again. "Another baby," he said, wonder in his voice. He crossed to her and pulled her into his arms. "Sarah, that's wonderful." "Is it?" She voiced the fear that had been gnawing at her. "Cole, I'm 31. The doctor said after Hope that another pregnancy could be risky, and we're finally stable. Finally, at a place where we're not just surviving. What if—" "Hey!" He tilted her face up to look at him. "No what-ifs. We'll handle whatever comes. Together, remember?" Sarah leaned into him, letting his steady presence calm her fears. "Together," she agreed. The pregnancy progressed normally at first. Sarah felt strong, energetic even. She continued helping with the ranch, teaching Emma to cook, working with Thomas on his reading. Cole hovered more than usual, but she tolerated it because she knew it came from love. Then, in her 7th month, everything went wrong. Sarah was in town picking up supplies when the pain started, sharp and cramping, radiating from her abdomen through her whole body. She doubled over in the middle of the general store, gasping. "Mrs. Remington," the shopkeeper rushed to her side. "What's wrong?" "The baby," Sarah managed. "Something's wrong with the baby." They got her to the doctor's office, sent someone racing to the ranch for Cole. The doctor examined her with gentle hands and a grave expression. "The baby's in distress," he said. "Your body's trying to reject the pregnancy. We need to decide. Try to save the baby, which puts you at risk, or end the pregnancy now to save you." Sarah felt her world tilt. How much risk? Significant. "Mrs. Remington, you're already bleeding internally. If we try to maintain the pregnancy and something goes wrong, we might not be able to save either of you. And if we end it now, you'll likely be fine, but the baby won't survive." Sarah closed her eyes, feeling tears leak down her cheeks. She thought of Thomas and Emma and Hope at home, waiting for their mother. She thought of Cole, who'd already lost one wife and one child. She thought of the tiny life inside her, fighting to exist. "I want to wait for my husband," she whispered. Cole burst through the door 20 minutes later, his face pale with fear. The doctor explained the situation again, while Cole held Sarah's hand so tight it hurt. "What do you want to do?" Cole asked her, his voice shaking. "I don't know," Sarah sobbed. "Cole, I don't know what's right. Save me or save the baby. How do I choose?" He cupped her face in his hands, his grey eyes fierce despite the tears streaming down his cheeks. "Sarah, listen to me. I love this baby. I already love them so much it hurts, but I love you more. I need you more. Our children need you. If we lose this baby, we'll grieve together. But if I lose you, I won't survive it. So please, love, please choose yourself." "But no." His voice was firm. "You've been everyone's shield for 10 years. You've protected me, protected our children, protected this family with everything you have. Let me be your shield now. Let me protect you, even if it means making this terrible choice." Sarah looked at the man she loved, this strong, steady, broken-hearted man who was willing to lose another child to keep her safe, and felt something settle in her chest. "Okay," she whispered, "okay." The procedure was quick and clinical, and utterly devastating. Sarah lay on the table while the doctor worked, feeling her body empty, feeling the life inside her slip away. Cole never left her side, holding her hand, stroking her hair, murmuring words she couldn't quite hear over the roaring in her ears. Afterward, they went home in silence. Sarah couldn't bring herself to explain to the children, so Cole did, while she lay in bed staring at the ceiling. She heard Emma crying, heard Thomas asking questions in his serious little boy voice, heard Hope's confused babbling. She wanted to comfort them, to be the strong mother they needed. But she had nothing left to give. The days that followed were dark. Sarah went through motions, cooking, cleaning, caring for the children. But she felt hollow inside. She'd saved herself at the cost of her baby, and the guilt was crushing. Cole tried to help, tried to reassure her, but she couldn't hear him past the grief. 2 weeks after the loss, Sarah was in the barn mucking stalls when she finally broke. She sank down in the hay and sobbed, great, wrenching cries that felt like they were tearing her apart from the inside. She didn't hear Cole approach, didn't realize he was there until his arms came around her from behind. "I'm afraid," she gasped out between sobs, the words that had become their touchstone all those years ago. "I'm afraid I made the wrong choice. I'm afraid that baby needed me and I abandoned them. I'm afraid I'm a terrible mother, a terrible person." "Stop." Cole turned her around and held her face in his hands, forcing her to look at him. "You made an impossible choice, and you survived it. That doesn't make you terrible. That makes you human." "But what if, Sarah?" His voice was gentle but firm. "You are the bravest person I know. You've faced down abusers and fires and poverty and fear, and you've never once given up. This grief you're feeling, it's not weakness. It's love. You're grieving because you loved that baby, even though you never got to meet them. That doesn't make you a bad mother. It makes you exactly the mother you've always been. Someone who loves fiercely and fights for what matters." "I don't feel brave," Sarah whispered. "You don't have to feel it. You just have to survive it." He pressed his forehead to hers. "And you will. We will. Together." Sarah clung to him and let herself cry, really cry, not the silent tears she'd been shedding in private, but the ugly, loud, cleansing sobs that came from the deepest part of her soul. And Cole held her through all of it, being her shield when she couldn't be her own. Slowly, painfully, Sarah began to heal. She talked to Emma about loss and love, finding comfort in her daughter's simple wisdom. She let Thomas help her with chores, his steady presence a balm. She cuddled Hope and marveled at the miracle of the children she did have. And at night, when the grief felt like it might swallow her whole, Cole was there, always there, her shield, her rock, her partner. 3 months after the loss, Sarah planted a tree on the hill where Cole's first wife and son were buried. A small pine that would grow tall and strong, a living memorial to the child they'd never know. The whole family gathered for the simple ceremony, and Sarah found she could finally breathe again. "Thank you," she said to Cole that night as they lay in bed, his arm around her waist in the position they'd slept in for 10 years. "For what?" "For being my shield when I needed one." She turned to face him, tracing the lines of his face in the moonlight. "For 10 years, I've tried to be strong for you, for the children, but you let me be weak. You held me up when I couldn't stand. That's love. Real love." "Together," Cole said, kissing her softly, "in strength and in weakness, in joy and in sorrow. Together." "Always together," Sarah agreed, and finally, she believed she would be okay. On their 15th anniversary, Cole surprised Sarah with a trip to Denver. 3 whole days, he said, presenting her with train tickets. "Just us. No children, no ranch, no responsibilities. Jack and his wife can watch the kids. Mary Henderson will help with meals. It's all arranged." Sarah stared at the tickets, her mind immediately going to all the things that could go wrong. "Cole, we can't just leave." "Yes, we can." He pulled her close, smiling that smile that still made her heart skip after 15 years. "Sarah, when was the last time we had time alone? Just the 2 of us?" She couldn't remember. Between the children and the ranch and the constant demands of their life, they'd become partners in survival rather than lovers. They still loved each other, fiercely, completely, but the romance had faded into practicality. "Okay," she said, surprising herself. "Yes, let's go." The train ride to Denver was like entering another world. Sarah watched the landscape roll past and felt something in her chest loosen. Tension she'd been carrying for so long she'd forgotten it was there. Cole sat beside her, his hand holding hers, looking more relaxed than she'd seen him in years. Denver itself was overwhelming. Buildings 3 and 4 stories tall, streets crowded with people, noise and bustle and energy. But it was also exciting. Sarah bought a new dress, the first one she'd chosen for herself in years. Cole took her to a fancy restaurant where they ate food she couldn't pronounce and laughed at their own awkwardness. That night in the hotel room, they made love like they were 20 again, without the tiredness that usually plagued them, without listening for children who might wake. Afterward, Sarah lay in Cole's arms and felt truly content for the first time in months. "Thank you for this," she murmured. "Thank you for saying yes." Cole kissed the top of her head. "I know life has been hard. I know we've both been so focused on surviving that we forgot to live. But Sarah, you're still the woman I fell in love with 15 years ago. Still brave, still beautiful, still my whole world." Sarah felt tears prick her eyes, but they were happy tears. "You're my world too, my home, my shield." "And you're mine," Cole said. "Always have been, always will be." The second day they explored the city. They visited museums and shops, ate candy from street vendors, watched street performers. Sarah felt young and free, unburdened by responsibility for the first time in years. They were walking back to the hotel when Sarah saw them, a man and woman, standing on a street corner arguing. The woman was young, maybe 20, with bruises on her arms and fear in her eyes. The man was older, angry, his hand gripping her wrist hard enough to leave marks. Sarah stopped walking. "Cole!" He'd already seen them. His expression darkened, and Sarah knew what he was thinking. They were both thinking of the girl Sarah had been 15 years ago, desperate and alone and terrified. "Stay here," Cole said, but Sarah was already moving. She approached the couple, her heart pounding. "Excuse me, miss. Are you all right?" The man rounded on her. "Mind your own business, lady. I'm making it my business. Sarah stood her ground, aware of Cole moving to her side. Let her go. She's my wife. I can do what I want. No, Sarah interrupted. She's a person, and you're hurting her. Let her go. Something in Sarah's voice must have gotten through because the man released the woman's wrist. We're leaving, he growled. No, the young woman said, her voice shaking. She looked at Sarah, at Cole, at the small crowd that had gathered. No, I'm not going with you. Jessica, I said no. The woman's voice grew stronger. I'm done. I'm not going back to that house, not going back to you. I'd rather be on the street. Sarah saw herself in that moment, saw the terror and the courage, the desperation and the hope. She made a decision. You don't have to be on the street, Sarah said. We have a ranch in Montana. We could use help. If you want work, want a safe place, come with us. Cole didn't even blink, just nodded his support. The young woman, Jessica, stared at them like they were offering her the moon. You don't know me, she whispered. Why would you? Because 15 years ago, someone offered me the same thing, Sarah said, and it saved my life. Consider it paying it forward. Jessica's husband tried to protest, but a police officer had arrived, drawn by the commotion. By the time everything was sorted out, Jessica had her few belongings and a train ticket back to Montana with the Remingtons. That night, with Jessica sleeping in the adjoining hotel room and Cole holding Sarah close, Sarah felt something profound settle in her chest. We're going to be okay, she said, not just surviving anymore, really, truly okay. More than okay, Cole agreed. We're going to thrive. Together. Together, Sarah echoed and kissed him deeply, grateful for 15 years of love and pain and growth, and excited for the years still to come. Jessica became part of their family, helping with the ranch and the children, slowly healing from her own trauma. And Sarah learned what she'd always known deep down, that shields protect not just the people who wield them, but everyone they cover. Their life wasn't perfect. There were still hard days, still struggles and setbacks. But they faced them all the same way. They'd faced everything for 15 years, together, always together. Thank you so much for listening to this story. I'd love to know where you're enjoying this tale from. Are you listening at home, during your commute, or perhaps while working? Please subscribe to the From Wild West channel and share your thoughts in the comments below. What did you think of Sarah and Cole's journey? Your feedback means the world to us.